Whoa, buddy. Put that thing back in its holster. We haven't gone anywhere.
I don't understand.
Check out the MichaelDukesShow.com for information on how to get access to the podcast.
Welcome to the party, pal.
The Michael Dukes Show.
The greed and the entitlement is astounding to me.
What more could you want from a low-budget radio program?
This is a dumpster fire.
That was just BS.
It is time to get a new perspective.
We know just what you need, and we've got just the cure. Open wide and prepare for a steaming hot cup of freedom.
I just don't fathom it.
The Michael Dukes Show, streaming live across the world.
Live around the world on the internet at MichaelDukesShow.com and across the state of Alaska on this, your favorite radio station and or FM translator. Woo! Little crisp this morning out there, 12 degrees outside the old radio ranch here, the beautiful Matsu, and cool and crisp in other parts of the state as well. Welcome to Tuesday. That is our time for the deep dives, weekly top three. This week, the post-election edition. I'm sure we'll get some analysis from Brad on everything that's happening with the potential. I mean, we're the only state in the union where we got to wait a month for all the details to come out. And, I mean, I guess I just feel like there should be a Jeopardy theme song playing in the background sometime the entire time that we're doing this. Anyway, we'll get some analysis from Brad on that this morning with the weekly top three. And then in hour two, I'll have a little bit of a recap plus some of the stories. And then we're going to be joined by Chris Story for an early segment with his take on the election results. You know it'll be positive because that's just how he is. And then we'll finish up with our weekly life coaching lesson to go with that analyses of the election results. So it's a full show. And we're ready to get into this and jump on. So let's get started. Brad Keithley, Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets, joins us this morning to discuss wood ticks, lunatics, and politics, not necessarily in that order. Good morning, Brad. How are you?
Michael, I'm doing great today. How about you?
You know, no complaints. It's a little crisp. I could complain, but it's okay. We've got it.
That's what sweatshirts are for.
Yeah, I should have put one on this morning. I got to tell you, I should have put one on this morning. Brad, let's get into it. Let's get started. We got a lot to cover this morning, and we're going to start talking about. We're going to use the big words today: the bipartisan plutocracy. I mean, that just sounds radioactive. What do we got here? Give me your take on the weekly top three, starting with number one.
Well, the election's over, and people are already announcing House and Senate organizations. In the House, Bryce Edgmond and Representative Stutes and Representative Kopp announced an organization for the House, the House majority. And when they announced it, they announced four principles that the majority is formed over, and those were not overspending from the Alaska Permanent Fund, staying within the POMV, what they now call the POMV spending cap. It's interesting how people, go grab titles that they think will that they think are popular. So spending, we now have a spending cap. We have a POMV spending cap. And by that, I assume they mean the POMV draw. Stable public education funding, which means K through 12 increases. Retirement reform, public sector retirement reform, and energy development. Those were the four that they included in the announcement of the majority. Now, here's the interesting thing. When James Brooks wrote his article, James Brooks of the Alaska Beacon wrote his article about the formation of the House majority, he included five. And this is James's sentence. Those principles include, first, not raising oil taxes. Second, not overspending from the Alaska Permanent Fund, stable public education funding, retirement reform, and energy development. he included, this is after talking to COP and presumably Bryce, he included not raising oil taxes. So if you're going to limit, as we should, limit the draw from the permanent fund to POMV, and you're not going to raise oil taxes, where's the squeeze going to be to pay for not only all these new programs, but the existing programs? Because we're already in deficit. I mean, we're already about $1.6 billion in deficit looking at FY25, looking at the current oil futures market. We're already about $1.6 billion in deficit. Even on the existing programs, just taking the FY24 budget, escalating it by 2.5%, we're already $1.6 billion in deficit. And if you're going to layer on these additional programs, and you're going to cap the POMV cap spending at traditional revenues plus the POMV draw, and you're not going to raise oil taxes, where's the squeeze going to come from? It's going to come from PFD cuts.
Wait, you used the word plutocracy. I think you meant kleptocracy, I think is what you meant.
Well, no, it's so this approach is it secures the place of the oil companies. They don't have to face oil taxes. Secures the place of the top 20% because they push the cost down to PFD cuts, and secures the non-resident industries, the industries dependent on non-residents or that utilize non-residents, because there will be no contribution required of the non-resident industries. All of it will be pushed off on middle and lower income Alaska families through PFD cuts. It is, for those here's the thing that I just find the most ironic out of this. For those who ran on, we're concerned about working Alaska families, and we're going to, prioritize working Alaska families and looking out for working Alaska families, like Maxine Dybert up in Fairbanks, Andrew Gray, Donna Mears, Ted Eichshed in East Anchorage. For those who ran on that issue, focusing on working Alaska families, they just sold out. I mean, they just sold out. The irony about this is this article by James Brooks appeared in the same week in which my op-ed that I wrote for the Alaska Beacon and others, talking about oil taxes and the fact there is, $400 to $500 million that Alaska can get without adversely affecting the competitive impact, the competitive situation of Alaska's oil industry, that we can go get $400 or $500 million. That this article appeared in the same week with that op-ed. And I just think it's an abandonment by the very people who claim they're looking out for working Alaska families. I think it's an abandonment of those very same working Alaska families by not at least raising the issue of oil taxes. I mean, look, they've taken it off the table before the session even starts. They took it off the table, within a week after the election. The principles
it's called
not raising oil taxes.
And they call it, I mean, those are called organizing principles, right? I mean, those are, when you form a coalition or a caucus, those are called organizing principles. Those are the ones that you stand behind, that you sign your name to. And if oil taxes are on, Brad, this is a complete refutation of everything the Fiscal Policy Working Group came together with in their bipartisan way. I mean, it's like they're hitting it point by point, but they're hitting it the opposite. No oil taxes, no regular taxes, no this. We've got a spending cap now, but it's a POMV spending cap, so we don't have to worry about that. It's like they're just hitting them one by one and trying to stop any kind of long-term fiscal plan.
This is why I have a problem. This is why I have a problem when some people say bipartisan good. Bipartisan equals good, because people are working across the aisle. They're focused on the good of all Alaskans by working across the aisle. It doesn't. I mean, it greatly depends. Just like partisanship, it greatly depends on what your principles are, what your bipartisan principles are. And it greatly depends on what you've joined together to do. If you've joined together to snuff out oil tax reform, and we need it. Look, we are 10 years into SB 21. SB 21 is showing cracks and creaks. It's showing some problems. I mean, the issue on which I wrote the op-ed this last week in the Beacon and other places is production is going up by 30%. The forecast in the spring revenue forecast is production goes up by 30%. Revenue from production taxes is going down by a third. It's going down by 35%. While just get this, wrap your mind around this. Production is increasing by 30%. Revenue from production taxes is going down by 35% over the same period. There's a problem in SB 21. I mean, SB 21 was sold on a lot of things, but one of them was we're going to get production increase, we're going to get investment in, we're going to get production increase, and revenues is going to benefit the state because revenues are going to go up. Well, they're not. Revenue from production taxes, the very thing that SB 21 focuses on, revenue from production taxes is going down by 35% over the next 10 years. If there's not a problem with that, if people don't see a problem with that, with production increasing by 30% and revenue from production taxes going down by 35% over the 10-year period, if people don't see a problem with that, then they're just never going to see a problem with anything. I mean, it's just always going to be whatever the old companies say is what we ought to do. But there is a problem. SB 21 is not operating in the way I don't think anybody would have said it was intended in 2014. There's a problem with the way some of those provisions work in an environment where you have rapidly increasing production as a result of increasing investment. There's a problem with the way it works in that environment, and it can be fixed. And it can be fixed in a way that doesn't take unduly affect the oil companies, unduly affect the competitive position of the oil companies. And it can be fixed in a way that allows Alaskans to benefit through the production tax system, allows Alaskans to benefit in the same way that the oil companies are benefiting from production increases. It can be fixed. And it should be fixed. I mean, that's the easiest way, frankly, to get additional revenues in that reduces the burden on middle and lower income Alaska families through PFD cuts. It should be fixed. And if you're concerned about working Alaska families, as Maxine Dybert, Andrew Gray, Donna Mears, Ted Eichett all said they were, if you're concerned about working, and others, if you're concerned about working Alaska families, that's the first thing you should focus on, because it's the easiest, it's the quickest, it's the least controversial in the sense that it doesn't start taxing Alaska individuals in a different way than PFD cuts. It's the first thing you should focus on. It's the thing that that your resource committee chairman or your finance committee chairman should be committed to looking at from day one. But it's the first thing that the bipartisan coalition is taking off the table. Those principles include not raising oil taxes. It's a sellout. It's a sellout. It's a sellout of everything Maxine Dybert said. It's a sellout of everything that Andrew Gray said. It's a sellout of everything that Donna Mears said. It's a sellout of everything that Ted Eichett said. And I don't get how they can join a coalition that is going to elevate oil companies, the top 20% non-residents, over the working Alaska families that they claim they were elected to represent. I just don't get it. So
and before we wrap up here, I just want to say, I mean, you've made mention of we're already in deficit. The 10-year plan from the governor, the projections already show we're in deficit over $1 billion this next year. That doesn't account for all the spending that they've just outlined that they want to include, right? It doesn't include the new K through 12 spending or the defined benefit spending or anything else. That's just with everything continuing at the status quo. They're basically locking us into where else does this money come from? There is no other place other than the permanent fund. It's going away.
Yeah. Well, I mean, they've said they've got a spending cap now. The spending cap is a permanent fund earnings. Interestingly enough, they said we ought to pay attention to statutes. We ought to honor. I think the word in their press release was honor the permanent fund, the POMV statutory cap. Well, there's two statutory caps in that statute. One is on the overall draw. The second is on how much can be taken for government. And that cap is a function of the overall draw less the explicit statutory amount set aside for permanent fund dividends. So there's a cap in there for how much should go for government. I don't think they meant that they're going to pay attention to that one.
I think
it's a very selective look. Anyway, the long and the short of it is it's a plutocracy, right? I mean, what this bipartisan group is going to do is they're going to look out for the rich and middle and lower income Alaska families, rich in government programs, and middle and lower income Alaska families. Yeah, who cares? I mean, they're being sold down the river from the very get-go, from the very start of the session, by saying that we're not going to look at oil taxes.
Brad Keithley, Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets. The weekly top 3 continues in just a moment. Number 2 is dead ahead. Don't go anywhere. The Michael Duke Show, common sense, liberty-based, free thinking radio. We will return with more in just a moment. Don't go anywhere.
If you missed the show, you can listen to it on your time with Dukes On Demand. Oh, and it's free. Like America used to be. Streaming live every weekday morning on Facebook Live and MichaelDukesShow.com.
Okay. I should have put a sweater on, man. My heater's running in the background and you can hear it, but man, it got a little cold in here this morning. There's no heat registers in the studio here. Brad, it is such a turnabout. And the fact that they released this press release the day after the election, they're like, oh yeah, we're so confident it's going to happen. They've obviously been working this hard behind the scenes for quite a while. And, but just the fact that they have basically thrown everything out that would have created some form of sustainability for the state in the long run. I mean, this can't last if they take, let's just say, you said next year is what, $1.6 billion debt? Yeah, is what they're projecting right now. That would essentially consume almost all of the remaining PFD at this point, right? Because that's about what
the PFD is about 2.2, 2.5, 2.4, somewhere in there. So it takes the major share of it for certain.
Yeah, it takes the lion's share. So that means within just 2 years, if it goes up again the following year, because these deficits, these $1 billion plus deficits are projected out for the next 10 years. And if they add the more school funding, defined benefits and all that kind of stuff, there's your $2 billion, right? I mean, a 14-16 PF or a 14-13 BSA is another $600-700 million increase a year.
That's a calculation I ought to do. I ought to do what the rate of spending growth would need to be to wipe out the PFD entirely. And it's probably not going to be that much. I mean, the issue is oil prices are going down, right? I mean, oil prices are going down from the projected levels, what the budgets have been based on, what the 10-year outlooks look like. 10-year outlook is, and oil prices are going down. So the delta between spending that's going up and oil prices that are going down, the delta is growing, and that delta is what determines the level of the PFD cut. And so it's easy. It's just a calculation. It's just a spreadsheet to figure out what the rate of spending growth would need to be to wipe out the PFD inside that delta. And it's probably not going to be much north of 5%. 5% spending growth, annual spending growth, which is probably about the annual rate of spending growth we've had over the last, decade. If average rate of growth over the last decade. So it's you can look at it a lot of different ways, but all of it's bad. If you're not going to do oil tax reform, I mean, I just don't get this. I just don't get this. And if that's the price to get Chuck Kopp in your majority, good Lord, that guy's expensive. I mean, if the price is, I'll come join your majority if you agree not to do oil taxes. If that's the price that Andrew Gray and Maxine Dybert and Donna Mears and Ted Eichhed and all the others have paid to get Chuck Kopp to come over, that's a hell of a price that you've just put on your constituents.
And then add to that Will Stapp price would be no imports of LNG, that we're going to have to subsidize gas to make Alaska gas work. That's his price. He said it in the article yesterday. As long as that, no imports. If we're not doing Alaska gas, I'm not on board. So, I mean, just keep adding dollar on top of dollar at that point.
You're paying a huge. I mean, all of this is to get the votes to increase K through 12, increase, do retirement reform, to redo, to go back to defined benefits, and to energy development, a bunch of state spending on energy development. If that's the price you're paying to get these guys over, that's just a huge price, and you're doing it. I mean, I want to make this point over and over and over and over and over again. You're doing it at the expense of the very constituents you said you were going to prioritize during your campaigns, and that's just, if the word sellout, may be overused, but it certainly applies in this situation. You're selling out your constituents.
Well, it feels like it, yeah, because you're not supporting them, you're not protecting them. They're the ones that are going to pay all the costs for your dreams and aspirations and your pie in the sky budgets. I mean, you talked about bipartisanship, and maybe I'll start the next segment with that before we jump into number 2, because I think that's an important point. It's not true bipartisanship where it's the parties, it's the philosophies of bigger government versus smaller government. Here we go, jumping back in.
Brad Keithley joins us every week to discuss oil, gas, and the economic forecast of Alaska. It's the Michael Dukes Show.
Brad Keithley continues with us, Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets, the weekly top 3, number 2. Before we get into it, you mentioned bipartisanship and how everybody aspires to it, and it's this great thing, but it's kind of a dirty word in some ways, and I don't really think it's about the parties, although it's saying bipartisan. We've got Democrats. What you've got is you've got a unified body of people who are pro bigger government, and you've got all the rest of the people out there that are smaller government, kind of have a fiscal plan, everything else. So it's not a true bipartisan. I mean, it may be 2 different parties, but their philosophies are all the same. More pro government spending, right?
That's a hugely important insight, Michael, and it pairs with the insight you've had on previous shows about the real divide in Alaska isn't between Republicans and Democrats. The real divide in Alaska is between the big government, but I don't have to pay for it, party, which includes both Democrats and Republicans, and the other side. Let's have smaller government, and let's share the burden broadly among a broad base. That's the real 2 parties we have in this state. I would call it the plutocrats and the rest of us. Yeah. But that's the real divide. And this is not a bipartisan setup in that regard. It is the plutocrats winning everything, and the plutocrats setting the agenda for themselves. Big government, but we don't have to pay for it, and the oil companies don't have to pay for it. So it means you guys on the other side of the divide, in the other economic party, you get wiped out.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, let's move on to number 2. Number 2 is, what are we supposed to think about AK LNG? And this should be interesting, to say the least.
Yeah. And so Governor Dunleavy releases this tape. I find it interesting that Dunleavy was the only one who had this tape. But anyway, Dunleavy releases this tape of President Trump talking, post-election, talking about that he's going to fight for Alaska like never before, and we're going to get the Alaska LNG line done, and a lot of other things, a lot of other things. But the one I want to focus right now is the AK LNG project. And people have blown up and said, "Oh, that's it, we're done. We got the AK LNG project now. We got President Trump behind us, and we're going to be able to bring this thing home." Not even close. I mean, remember in 2016, Trump was going to, one of Trump's themes, if elected, was he's going to revive the coal industry, and there was going to be a coal industry renaissance. Didn't happen. And the reason that didn't happen, and the reason this is frankly likely not to happen, is economics. You can say you're behind a project. You can say you're behind coal. You can say you're behind the Alaska LNG project. You can say you're behind a lot of things, but if the economics aren't there, they aren't going to happen. And there's nothing with respect to the AK LNG project. There's nothing about their economics that changed with the election. If the federal government wants to fund all of it, maybe that changed, but I doubt that's in a Congress that says they're going to be concerned about fiscal responsibility. I doubt that's going to happen. There's nothing else that changed about the economics, and let's focus on the economics of Alaska LNG just for a moment. We do a Monday chart. Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets does a Monday chart, and our Monday chart is looking at LNG futures. There's futures, just like there's futures markets for oil. There's futures markets for LNG, and they're focused on three world global markets. One is what's called the JKM marker, the Japanese JKM, the Japanese Korea marker. It's essentially the Pacific price. Another is the TTF price, the tidal transfer facility in Denmark, in Europe. It's the European price, and then there's the UK price at the national balancing point in the UK. Those are the three major LNG futures markets. If you look out over time, the JKM marker price is going down. The Japanese Korea marker price, the Pacific marker price is going down. In fact, by 2029, 2030, the futures market is saying that the Japanese Korea marker price is $7.78, $8. Let's just call it $8. The Wood Mackenzie study for Alaska LNG, on its best day, on its really best day, with a lot of great assumptions about it, about how much in-state demand they can develop and about how low they can get the cost, is about $12. So you've got the futures price telling you by the time the AK LNG project can be up and running, is telling you by the time you get the AK LNG project up and running, that the futures price in the Pacific market is going to be about $7.78. You can see it on the screen there, and which is the dark red price that goes down over time, and the AK LNG price, which is the dotted line or dash line that we started including this week, is $12.80, and they, with a little bit more demand, they can get that down nearer to $12. That's a huge gap. That's a $4 gap. That's a 50% gap between the JKM price in 2029 and 2030. And keep in mind that even if AK LNG started today, it wouldn't be up and running until 2031. So we're looking at these prices. When you look at the right side of the chart, you're looking at the prices that are going to be, that the futures market is telling you are going to be around for Pacific LNG and 29, 2030, and the dash line is telling you what the AK LNG price is going to be. That's the economics out there, and it's going to get. We're going to talk about this more in the third segment, but the economics for LNG exports, LNG on the water in the world is going to get better under Trump, because he's going to likely undo the limitations on lower 48 LNG projects that the Biden administration put on. Trump is likely going to essentially deregulate the lower 48 LNG market, which will put more LNG projects out there and more LNG on the water, driving the price down even further. So when you have all this euphoria around AK LNG, you got to temper that with what the market's telling you and with what the economics are telling you. The response to the Trump video on Twitter, of all places, Twitter that's moving farther and farther right, but the response on Twitter was interesting. I follow a bunch of economists, energy economists on Twitter, and here was the reaction of one that's representative of almost every other reaction out there. Trump vows to build long-delayed LNG export project in Alaska. However, the project has struggled to move forward due to a few reasons. No firm commitments from buyers, an 800-mile pipeline required for the project that hasn't been able to reach final investment decisions because of the economics. The economics aren't changing. So yeah, it's great. I mean, it's great to have a video. It's great for Governor Dunleavy to be able to, show some tangible sign that Trump remembers his name and remembers what's important to him. But the economics aren't changing. And as we go into, as Alaska goes into this continuing discussion about what we're going to do about South Central gas supplies, or South Central energy supplies, we need to keep in mind the economics aren't changing around the LNG project. There's a couple of other things about the LNG project that are important to remember. One is the time commitment. In order to get down to $12 or $12 an MCF, MMBTU for LNG prices, the Alaska project has to have firm commitments for 20 to 30 years. We're locking in a supply source, a single supply source for 20 to 30 years when we do LNG. So if the world changes, if energy prices elsewhere go down, if LNG prices plunge in the world because we got a lot more LNG on the water than we had before, if the economics of renewables break through, we've still locked in for 20 to 30 years for the LNG project. Importing LNG keeps a lot of flexibility that we lose if we lock in on the Alaska LNG project. And the other thing is the volume commitment that you got to make to LNG. Not only Alaska LNG, not only do you have to lock in on time 20 to 30 years to pay out the project, because you're recovering the costs on a volumetric basis, you have to have high volumes to recover those costs as well. And so we're essentially locking in on the next 20 to 30 years. All of our energy supplies are going to come through the LNG. If we do this, are going to come through the LNG line and are going to come, at high volumes, because we can't do anything else, or else we turn the LNG project into a huge white elephant, an unpaid for white elephant. So there's a lot of fundamental economics out there that haven't changed with the election.
Right.
And the euphoria that people are, going off on now about Alaska LNG because Trump cut this video. Okay, it's nice, but it hasn't changed the fundamental economics.
Well, I mean, there's a positive here in what Trump is doing for energy as a whole, for energy independence and American production and things like that. But what most people don't understand is that as you open the doors wide open to that, it automatically drives the price down on everything, gas and oil. And so you're going to see those prices drop, and that's going to create knock-on effects for Alaska specifically, because we depend so much on energy production for the revenue stream for the state. And if they don't get it there, there's only one other place for them to get it.
Yeah. That's the third segment. Let's not go too far down that road yet.
Right.
Let's keep focused on LNG right now. But
I just call them like this thing. But
yeah, but we've got to keep economics in mind. I mean, I honestly don't mind people, getting excited about the Trump cut a video on LNG. That's great. Yes. He cut a video back in 2016 on coal. Yes, that was great. Everybody was happy about that. But we've got to keep economics in mind, or else, we risk, if we run off the deep end and say, oh, it's got to be LNG. It's got to be, it's got to be Alaska LNG project. It's got to be phase one of the Alaska. We run off the deep end. We're locking ourselves in for the long term. We're locking ourselves in for significant volumes for the long term, and we're locking ourselves in at a time that world LNG prices, the futures market is telling us world LNG prices are going down, and Trump's other hand, unleashing lower 48 energy is going to drive those prices down. We need to keep economics in mind as we go through this. And I don't see anything in Trump's video, and I don't see anything out there in the world right now that tells us the economics have shifted as a result of the election.
yeah, no, and again, that's the whole thing. It has to be economical. And if it doesn't make sense economically, no company is going to invest in it. I mean, Kyle just said nobody in the entire world will sign a 30-year commitment at a price 50% higher than the market and futures market are predicting. Nobody's going to sign a contract like that. And even if the state subsidizes it, who pays for that? Oh, that would be us. And then we'd be left holding the bag on the other end.
And it's not, I mean, Michael, there's a lot of things to keep in mind, but one other thing to keep in mind is the Alaska LNG project is fixed costs. I mean, some people say, well, energy prices are going to go down, so the futures market is showing a decline. Well, there'll be a decline in the Alaska LNG. No, there won't. I mean, it's fixed costs. It's the cost of the pipe. That's 90% of the cost of the project. And those costs, once you build the pipe, it's sunk. Those costs aren't changing. I mean, the only way they're changing is the bondholders take a hit by the LNG project not paying them back, and the equity holders certainly take a hit by not getting a return. That's a fixed cost. So it's not that, oh, world energy prices are going to go down because of Trump, and so we'll benefit from that. No, we won't. I mean, it'll kill us to have economically. It will kill us to be tied into a 20 to 30 year project at high volumes at relatively high prices compared to what the futures market is telling us is going to be out there otherwise.
Fascinating discussion with Brad Keithley, Alaskans for Sustainable Budget. You can find him at ak4sb.com if you want to look, or on Twitter, X, Facebook, wherever he wants to argue with you. He'll find a way out there. We're moving on to number 3 of the weekly top 3. We will continue in just a moment. The Michael Duke Show, common sense, liberty-based, free thinking radio. We return with more in just a moment. Don't go anywhere.
We're broadcasting live through a series of tubes,
allowing all of these entities to provide streaming stuff going on the internet.
Well, it's kind of hard to explain. Sorry. Streaming live every weekday morning on Facebook Live and MichaelDukesShow.com.
Okay, Brad Keithley is our guest, Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets, the weekly top 3. Brad, I mean, if President Trump really wants to solve, I mean, he's talking about more of a national issue and a global issue with this energy development. But if he really wanted to help out Alaskans, he'd just sign an executive order waiver for the Jones Act and allow us to tank LNG from the North Slope down to Kenai. I mean, that would be it, right? I mean, then it would just be however long it took to reverse engineer the Marathon plant down there to import. And I mean, they could just tank it right up and put it in ships and run it around. And the next thing you know, we got all we need is 2-3 ships a year in gas for consumption and to be able to put it away. That would be a quick fix of using Alaskan LNG.
We've got a depth issue at the North Slope. LNG tankers are a little bit deeper. I know we float barges in, but barges are shallower than LNG tankers. We got a depth issue at the North Slope, and we need to figure out what we're going to do about that. One way would be to build a pipe out to where we don't have the depth issue. The other way would be build a huge offshore extension to hit ships where the depth is good enough. But there's a depth issue up at the North Slope that has to be addressed. If it's not only the Jones Act, it's not only the legal issue involved, it's also a physical, economic, or
that would be a fraction of the cost of a pipe, right? I mean, that would be a fraction of a cost of a pencil line, you would think.
Presumably so. I'm not seeing a good. I used to, the oil companies used to spend a lot of time worrying about that, and I used to see fairly good numbers on those, and they were fairly high. But I'm sure you're right that they're not as high as the pencil line or the bullet line or whatever we're calling it.
Right. The ASAP line or whatever they're calling it now. I mean, I think this would be a one way to examine it, to see what would it take. We need a feasibility issue. Somebody obviously has been keeping these plans in a drawer somewhere. How much would they, update them with today's costs and figure out how much that we're going to be, and at least have it on the table. But otherwise, the economics just don't work out. No company is going to invest in that with those kind of futures. I mean, that chart, when you sent me that chart yesterday, about dropped my cup of coffee, because I was like, wow, that pretty much says it all right there.
Yeah, it's amazing how much LNG is coming on. Economics work. I mean, when there's a demand for lower price supplies, people will build new facilities to do that, and economics work. And again, we're going to do a little bit more of this in the next segment. But if Trump undoes the Biden limitations on LNG plants, and if Trump undoes effectively the Biden limitations on natural gas supply, if Trump undoes those, we're going to have more LNG plants, bigger LNG plants, more volume, more production of LNG down in the lower 48, which is going to drop the price even more. So it's, I mean, economics work when you have demand and you have the ability to find ways to increase supply. That drops price, and that's what's going on there. We can't because so much of the Alaska LNG project is fixed costs, is in the pipeline itself, not in the gas component. I mean, the gas component in that estimate, the gas component is only $1. So let's say we gave away gas on the North Slope, just free, free. That drops that price, that 12, whatever that price is, 12.80 something, drops it $1, goes down to 11 something. Still much higher than the global LNG, than what the futures market is telling us the global LNG price is going to be. So it's we don't have the flexibility to drive down the price of the Alaska supply in a way that that keeps it competitive with what's going on in the globe.
Yeah,
I mean,
that's it.
I wish it was otherwise. I mean, people, sometimes I've been accused of being anti-Alaska. I'm not. I'm pro-Alaska economy, getting the lowest price goods into the state to support the economy. But some people say, well, you just don't like Alaska. I love Alaska.
It's the difference between theory and reality. In theory, that's great, but in reality, is it economic? And what is the actual cost going to be? Oh, you're anti-Alaskan because we know it's going to cost twice what it would cost to buy it somewhere else, but we're all about that. We're why are you so anti? I mean, it's nuts. It's like saying we're just going to stop shipping all food from the lower 48 and Fred Meyer will only have Alaskan grown. Well, first of all, they'd have to shrink the footprint down to a quarter of what it is today, and you would pay 2 or 3 times as more. Are you ready for that? I mean, is that what why are you so anti-Alaskan that you want to buy food made outside? I mean, this is the global market. This is what happens in those areas.
It is. And it benefits us. It benefits us sometimes, but it hurts us other times. And we just need to recognize that and deal with it, as opposed to, oh no, we're going to have Alaska gas no matter what.
Yeah, it's frustrating. It's frustrating to watch because I too would love to see Alaskan gas be used in Alaska, but the numbers have got to pencil out. They've got to pencil out. If they don't, then what's happening is we, the citizens, are paying for everything, regardless of what our energy bill looks like. Here we go.
Our shrinking citizens.
Public enema number 1. Oh, wait, sorry. Public enemy number 1, which makes more sense. On the other hand, he's a little bit of a pain in the Michael Duke Show.
Whoa, that was mean. All right, let's continue on. Brad Keithley, Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets, the weekly top 3, our shrinking population that Brad and I were just talking about. All right, before we get sidelined here into something else, let's talk a little bit about the internal inconsistencies of the Trump energy policy. And there's pros and cons to the Trump energy policy. We were just talking about that here a minute or 2 ago. But overall, like I said, there's a knock-on effect anytime you get some of these energy policies with Alaska, specifically because we draw all our revenue from, a big chunk of our revenue from the energy sector. And so if it affects that, it's going to affect everybody. But Brad, give us your thoughts on the inconsistencies here.
So I think people would say fairly that the Trump energy policy is more production, is more access to public lands than certainly has occurred in the Biden administration, occurred in the Obama administration, more access to public lands, opening up more production areas, reducing limitations on artificial limitations on energy choice by forcing investment in renewables when oil and gas may be cheaper, and reducing those limitations and just opening things up generally. What that's going to do, likely, is it's going to increase supply. It's going to increase U.S. supply. We will increase, access to public lands. We will increase. We will overcome limitations on gas production and on oil production. We'll build new pipelines. We'll open up the energy market, the oil and gas energy market, in a way that will increase supply. That's great in terms of the amount of supply. It's great in terms of production. It's great in terms of sources. but that will have an effect. No one is looking at increases in demand that are commensurate with the increases in supply. And so if you increase supply without a commensurate increase in demand, what you're going to have is lower price. Increased supply, relatively the same demand, is going to result, or some slight growth in demand, but not commensurate, is going to lower price. And that's going to be the consequence on both the oil side and the gas side from the U.S. standpoint. And so what's that going to do? Well, it's going to make Alaska's life a little bit more difficult. Yes, we may get increased volumes, but as we're showing now under SB 21, what that's resulting in is in reductions in production taxes. And it's not being offset by increases in royalty, because a lot of the increased production is coming from federal lands where the royalty goes to the federal government as opposed to going to the state government. So increased production, at least the experience that we're going through in the next 10 years, according to the spring revenue forecast, increased production is leading to lower revenues for the state. Additional increased production, opening up additional lands, going and exploring for and developing additional lands, will drop price and likely also have the effect of dropping revenues to the state, because increased production is not resulting in increased revenues to the state. It's resulting in lower revenues to the state. So we need to be real. We need to understand the trade-offs that are going to go on here. Yes, increased production, opening up additional lands, provides new opportunities that Alaska should take advantage of, additional development that we should take advantage of, additional growth in production volume that we should take advantage of. But we need to look at the revenue side and understand what that's going to go, what's going to happen to us on the revenue side. And we need to balance that. The increased growth is going to come as a result of what the federal government's doing. They're going to open up additional federal lands. The revenue side is entirely within the scope of the Alaska state government, and whether we take the actions necessary to get a corresponding increase in revenues as well. We also need to recognize, as we just went through with the LNG, on the LNG side in segment 2, we also need to recognize that increased volumes, increased LNG development, increased exports, increased gas production, increased exports in the lower 48 of LNG is going to have a knock-on effect on the economics of what's going on in Alaska. It's going to reduce the price of LNG globally, and it's going to increase that delta that exists between the Alaska LNG project, phase 1 of the Alaska LNG project, and globally available supplies. So it is good from the standpoint of energy development. It's good from the standpoint of oil and gas development, oil and gas opportunities in the state. The Trump administration will be, but the economics, I mean, we're not. It's unclear what the economic effect's going to be. The economic effect could be bad as a result of increased supply, increased development, lower prices, and even lower production tax revenues.
I mean, bad for Alaska, not necessarily for the country, but bad for Alaska overall, especially in where we're sitting. Now, have you done any analysis of this phase 1, the Wood-Mackenzie phase 1 of the Alaska gas pipe? Have you done any analysis of what that's going to cost Alaskan citizens if we, instead of a private entity, tries to underwrite that? Do you have any idea what the cost of that will be to Alaskans? And what would the ultimate cost then? What would it then cost us at the pipe, right? When we're heating our houses or doing that down, in the South Central or any area where we're generating electricity with the gas. I mean, have we looked at any numbers on that?
Well, Wood-Mackenzie does have those numbers in terms of the per MMBTU price in South Central, and that was the 1288 that we were, or 12 whatever it was that we were looking at on the chart previously. And that's, if I recall correctly, the LNG phase 1, the Alaska LNG phase 1 is now, they're saying, is 10 billion, 12 billion, somewhere in that range in terms of cost. to give you some perspective, that's about a seventh of the size of the permanent fund right now. About 10 to 12 billion, be about a seventh of the size of the permanent fund. Permanent funds plus or minus about $70 billion. So that's the range of cost. If we have to build it ourselves, the price is the 1288 is assuming full volumes, assuming a 30-year commitment, 20 to 30-year commitment, and assuming full volumes over that entire period of time. That's the cost. And, compared to the world market, that's what the chart was. It was comparing the price, that price against the world market, which is showing prices in the sevens. The futures market showing prices in the sevens right now.
I'm just wondering what Alaskans would pay directly in that kind of, in the form of PFD taking or government expenditure or what, price at the wellhead or price at the meter, kind of thing. I'm just thinking we're so, people out there are so determined that we have Alaska gas at any cost. And I'm just like, but at what cost? Is it double what it would be for us to import it? I mean, could we have it delivered for that $7 and change from the Asian market? I mean, these are the questions that are running in my mind as I look at this. What is the actual cost to Alaskans going to be if we demand in this emotional way that we must use Alaskan resources?
Oh, we could well be, by the time you count if we have to pay for the bulk of, if Alaska has to pay for the bulk of the LNG facility out of PFD cuts, and you translate that into, we could well be in the high teens in terms of the cost per MMBTU, both the cost of the LNG plus the cost of the foregone PFD, in order to finance the building of the LNG line. We could well be in the high teens compared to a world price of what the futures market is telling us now is going to be sub 10, is going to be single digits. So yeah, we could well be above more than 2 times. And again, Michael, I want to, because this is important. Again, it's not just a one-off. It is a 20 to 30 year commitment at full volumes that we're talking about, that sort of difference. So significant.
It's a big number. It's a lot of change, and it's a lot of pie in the sky. I think people, again, trying to ease the electorate instead of looking at the actual numbers, and that's a real problem. Brad Keithley, Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets, the weekly top 3. Brad, thank you so much for coming on board, as always.
Michael, as always, thanks for having me.
All right, folks, we got more coming up. Don't go anywhere. Hour 2 dead ahead. Be kind, love one another, live well if you have to leave. Otherwise, we'll see you when we return for Hour 2. I mean, that's the thing, Brad. We are so hung up on we must have Alaskan gas. We must use, and again, I keep going back to my food argument. I mean, I'm all for food sustainability, food security, building, growing what we can here and doing all that. I buy vegetables from the farmers and I do everything that I can do. But the bottom line is, in this global market, the idea that we reinvent the wheel and only make food that, only eat food that's here. I mean, nobody would buy into that. Nobody would. But as soon as it's Alaskan gas, then it's an emotional tie, regardless of the cost. And that's the thing. Nobody's talking about. That's why I was asking those questions. Nobody's talking about the end cost on this. For what does it take? They keep putting the boogeyman of, they could shut us off. They could just not ship gas to us, yada, yada, yada. I mean, there's a lot of fear tactics going on there, but what is the actual cost to Alaskans in the end?
Yeah. Well, I'll try to run those numbers. That's a good question. I'll try to run those numbers. I'm going to wait. Wood Mackenzie is supposed to do a full presentation to some committee of the legislature at the end of this month. And I want to see what that, I mean, there may be surprises in there. They may have found ways to have cost savings, and I want to see that before I do the full analysis. But yeah, I mean, that's a good number to run. And the equivalent on the oil side, Michael, the equivalent of this emotionalism on the oil side is SB 21. Oh my God, we've got to stick with SB 21. It's worked. The volumes are increasing. Look at all this production increase. Look at all this new investment. Look at all these people, going back to work. Isn't that all great? Let's look at the revenues. I mean, let's look at the economics of what's happening with SB 21. and they're going down, folks.
That's like
They're going down.
You're in a company making widgets, and look, the demand for the widget is up. We went from 1 million a day to 2 million a day. But how much money are we making? Well, we're losing money, but that's okay. Look at the volume of that. It'll make it up one day. I mean, it's crazy. Oh, the production is going up. Okay, great. What's the take? Oh, the take is 30% less. Ooh, nobody's talking about that except you.
Yeah, it's a little stunning. I mean, seriously, your jaw dropped when you saw the chart about, the futures, LNG future prices. My jaw just completely hit the floor when I saw that the so-called bipartisan House majority or bipartisan House caucus, the ones that have said, the ones whose members have been out there saying, we're looking out for working class Alaska families. We're looking out for middle and lower. When that's the one that headlined their principles with no change in oil taxes, no change in declining oil tax. I mean, I don't get it, Michael. I don't get it. It is. I mean, the explanation, I think, is your explanation of it's not really Republicans and Democrats. It's the plutocrats against the rest of us. And I think that's probably the explanation of what's going on. Well, but for Dybert and for Gray and for Mears and for Eichhed and for, Cliff Grow and for others to buy into, people who have said they're focused on working Alaska families, for those people to buy into that principle is just, I don't know if we ever get out of this. If we've got nobody really standing up for working Alaska families, I don't know if we ever get out of this.
Well, and especially if you hit them with a cold hard truth and you're like, reduction in, increase of production, reduction in royalties, where does the money come from? And what happens when that money source is gone? That's my big thing here, is that you can only draw from the bottomless, quote unquote, permanent fund dividend side until it's gone. And if you're increasing and you're increasing and you're increasing and it's $200 million a year in increase just baked into the formula, I mean, in 5 years, that's $1 billion. Where does that money come from? Oh, yeah. Well, then it's us, right? Then it's, hey, sweet lips, your free ride's over. And then as you talked about earlier, that creates the doom loop of, well, these people are like, I'm not paying. It's already hard enough to live here. I'm leaving. And they leave. And those taxes get spread over a smaller area. And then and then somebody else says, no, I can't. And they bail. And this pie just starts shrinking smaller and smaller. There's nothing left.
It's already been us. I mean, I know that the issue out there in the future is it will be us again, but it's already been us. It's already been the working middle and lower income Alaska families that have been paying for it through PFD cuts. They're already bearing the burden, and they're already leaving. If you look at the outmigration is in the middle and lower income Alaska families. They're the ones leaving. Why do you think they're leaving? Because the economics aren't working for them anymore.
Yeah, no, it's brutal. It's brutal when you look at it all. All right, Brad, final thoughts, elections, anything else? I got about 90 seconds here.
Oh, I'm going to be interested to see what the comments are. Certainly, once the final election results come out, I'm going to be interested in seeing what Wood Mackenzie says about the LNG project. All of this is going to be a continuing conversation. But what I want people to focus on throughout all of it is the economics. Economics matter. Who pays matters. The consequences of who pays, the consequences of economics matter. All of this nationalism about it's got to be Alaska gas and all this nationalism about SB 21, you've got to look at the economic consequences of that. And if we don't, we're just going to continue to keep going down this death spiral, this doom loop that we're already in.
Yeah. The metrics of the economy. What does it cost? Who pays? Those are all things that we should be asking that none of these people seem to be asking. And unfortunately, the one guy that's really been asking these questions, Ben Carpenter, is not going back to the legislature. And that is, like I said, of the good, the bad, and the ugly. That is the ugly for sure. All right, Brad Keithley, go ahead quickly.
Well, I just hope Ben keeps talking. I mean, I hope he can.
Yeah, I hope he
on
does.
The economics.
I hope he does as well. All right, Brad, thank you so much. We'll see you next week, okay?
Michael, as always, thanks for having me.
Folks, we're out of time. The Michael Duke Show. Common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio. Hour 2 is right now.
Whoa, buddy. Put that thing back in its holster. We haven't gone anywhere.
I don't understand.
Check out the MichaelDukesShow.com for information on how to get access to the podcast.
Welcome to the party, pal.
The Michael Dukes Show.
The greed and the entitlement is astounding to me.
What more could you want from a low-budget radio program?
This is a dumpster fire.
That was just BS.
It is time to get a new perspective.
We know just what you need, and we've got just the cure. Open wide and prepare for a steaming hot cup of freedom.
I just don't fathom it.
The Michael Dukes Show, streaming live across the world.
Live around the world on the internet at michaeldukeshow.com and across the state of Alaska on this, your favorite radio station and or FM translator. Good morning, my friends, and welcome back to hour 2 of the Tuesday edition of the Michael Duke Show. The michaeldukeshow.com is where you'll find the audio-only stream, which is up and running right now, plus links to Facebook and YouTube, Rumble, wherever it is that you want to watch the program. This is where you do it, is out there on the interwebs, ready to go, taking questions and comments from listeners and talking about all this stuff. Coming up in hour 2 today, we will be finishing up the program with Chris Story for our weekly life coaching lesson, but we're also going to get an extra segment with Chris here coming up in about 13, 14 minutes, where we get his analysis of the election thus far, his post-election analysis of where things are going and what's happening. And so we'll get that from him here in the first segment. He'll be a little political before he gets back to the touchy-feely positivity stuff, which, I mean, trust me, that's why I bring him on every week, because I need that positivity. I need that positivity in such a way, such a big way, such a way. It'll be it'll be exciting and interesting to do here. All right. So what are we doing here in this first segment? Well, I do have some stories that I want to talk about. But before we do that, I want to talk a little bit just for a second about what Brad was going on about, because I am seeing a troubling trend in what all of our elected leaders are talking about here. This idea that somehow we can avoid taxing the oil companies more, that we can stop all this other stuff, that the PFD is the only viable pot of money, that we can't talk about importing LNG. That's a non-starter for people, et cetera, et cetera. It completely ignores the facts of, again, arithmetic. What do we talk about with Nick Begich all the time? The arithmetic of the situation. We're just ignoring it. We're just looking at it and go, oh, don't worry, it'll never happen here. We're too big to fail. Can't go on. I mean, these people, this new majority that they're talking about, have their five things that they want to talk about, right? The first one, the principles, again, not raising oil taxes, not overspending from the Alaska Permanent Fund, meaning the POMV draw, stable public education funding, which means a 1413 BSA. That's what they're pushing for. Don't let them tell you anything different. Retirement reform, which is, of course, the defined benefits. Can you hear the cash register ringing in the background? And then energy development, which, of course, has to deal with the Alaska natural gas problem in the Cook Inlet currently. Now, all of those things, well, with the exception of not raising oil taxes, all of those things essentially all you hear in the background is I can just hear Pink Floyd's Money running in the background. That's all I can hear. Because all of those things are going to cost more. Now, as many of us are happy that Trump won the election over Harris, as many of us are that are in that position, Brad laid out some highlights to basically say, look, his policies in energy are good for America, but not necessarily good for Alaska, because our economy, a big chunk of it, 30%, is built on energy royalties and those things coming in. And as we expand exploration in oil and in natural gas, then the price of those on a world market goes down. And so our take will be less than in fact, the oil prices are already down from where they were being projected before the end of last session. We're going to start this next session with a $1.6 billion deficit. Just think about that for a minute. $1.6 billion. Then they want to add stable public education funding. And that BSA is, if they go up to the 1413, if I remember my numbers correctly from the session, that's almost $700 million in a 1413 BSA. And the Reason Foundation said that the defined benefits program could cost upwards of $1 billion a year. Even if it's another $500 million a year in costs for the retirement reform, add that to the $700 million BSA increase, not to mention the fact whatever they decide to do with the royalty relief in Cook Inlet or whatever incentive that they're going to do, there'll be a cost to that. But just the first two, that's an additional $1.2 billion. So if you have a $1.6 billion deficit and you add another $1 billion to it, that's $2.6 billion. Well, the entire permanent fund payout is only 2.2. And that's it. That's the ball game, folks. That's the whole thing. And that's year one. That is year one. Because as they increase these things, and of course they're talking about retirement reform only for first responders. Oh, no, wait. Now they're talking about teachers too. And if you don't think that the rest of the state, the rest of the employment sectors of the state government, the other units in state government, if you don't think they will clamor to get the same thing for the sake of equity, within just a couple short years, we'll have 30,000 people on a defined benefits program. And nobody's talking, but we can't raise oil. And then, of course, then we've hand-tied ourselves from raising any oil taxes. Brad himself, an oil and gas guy, has said $400 to $500 million a year being left on the table if we don't refactor SB 21. We got a 30% increase in projected production, but our projected revenues have dropped 35%. Look at the delta on that one, speaking of deltas. So not only are we going to spend more, we're going to take in less. And under 4 more years of President Trump, if he continues to push this agenda of more energy, which I support, but it will have that knock-on effect of reducing the prices of energy. We're looking at 4 years of low revenues. How do we pay for that? How do we pay for these pie in the sky things? And then people like Ben Carpenter get axed out of the legislature. One of the few people who was really talking about, and his whole push was a long-term fiscal plan. There is no long-term fiscal planning in the state at all. They're not. No. They want every dollar to be spent in the public sector, and they're not even paying attention to what's happening in the private sector. Again, the whole thing could shrink up and blow away, and they don't care because they've got that money pump of the permanent fund, putting money out there. And as long as their service contractors are still working and still up, they don't care if all the mom and pops go away. It just doesn't matter to them because that's not the economy. The economy is the government. So while there's lots of things to celebrate in this post-election deal, like I said the day after election, the good, the bad, and the ugly is the fact that people like Ben Carpenter didn't make it back. There will not be a voice for fiscal sanity, for long-term fiscal planning, or for any kind of long-term fiscal plan. There's nobody in there talking about it. I mean, none of the people that are there now, and maybe one of the new people will start to talk about it. But for the most part, it's all returning people. So is anybody else really going to focus on that? Is anybody else going to pick up the torch and carry the torch that Ben Carpenter tried to take across the finish line? He could barely get out of the starting blocks with it through no fault of his own. There is a determined push in the legislature. And again, this goes back to that whole bipartisanship thing where it's not really about parties in this state. It's about philosophies of spending. More government spend good on one side, less government spend good on the other. And unfortunately, this whole state seems to be controlled by the more government spend crowd. That's the bottom line. It's so frustrating. So frustrating to watch and to see it. And with so many good things coming out of the election, this is one of those things where I just look at that and I go, wow. First of all, total disappointment in the electorate down on the peninsula that they would not see what Ben Carpenter's, or that they bought into Jesse Bjorkman's smear campaign on the tax thing. But again, I guess I shouldn't be surprised because they're just not paying attention to what's going on. And they just think it's all going to be great, except for when the new taxes do come, and they are coming. Ben at least will be able to sit back and say, well, I told you so. I mean, I don't know what good that'll do us, but that's where we're at right now. It's just insanity. What else? Oh, this real quick. This is another piece of insanity. Reported this morning in the ADN. Police in Homer are investigating after someone shot into a building belonging to the local reproductive health care clinic. The Ketchimack Bay Family Planning Clinic said in a social media post in an email sent to supporters that several rounds of ammunition were fired into the front of the building at about 5:45 a.m. yesterday morning. No one was in the building at the time, and the staff discovered the bullets when they arrived for the day. They said police were alerted to gunshots in the area by neighbors early Monday morning, but the police were not able to locate the source of the shots or the damage to the building until the clinic staff contacted them. They said they missed the windows, which would have triggered the security alarm, but bullets were found shot through the walls to the exterior door, and they do have security camera footage of the incident. So I hope they find these people. Look, you can agree or disagree. I don't know if they provide abortions there or what. I don't know. But this is not the way to get your point across. Let me just throw that out there. Especially in a community as small as Homer, that's not the way to get your point across. And I hope they find hope they find the guy or the gal or whoever it is. And I hope they put him under the jail, because that is not what we, especially as gun owners, want to be held up as an example of, fear and everything else. That is madness for a small town like Homer. So again, I hope they find them, and I hope they get what's coming to them. All right, we got to go. We'll be back with more. The Michael Duke Show. Common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio. Chris Story's up next with some election analysis. We'll be back right after this.
Running on 100% pure beard power. Oh, also some coffee. We dip our beard in coffee.
Nice beard.
The Michael Duke Show.
Okay. We're in the commercial break right now. Let me go back up here to see what you guys are saying. Randy said, Alaska's part of America. What's good for America is good for Alaska. I'm sorry, there's no parallel by Randy. What could be good for America may not be good for Alaska. What's good for America as a whole in energy independence and all these other things may cost Alaska in the long run because we base our whole economy on oil and gas and energy. Not our whole economy, but a big chunk of it. Did you know? Susan's over here still spinning the pre-election stuff. That Project 2025. Yeah. Okay. All right. It's in the water. It's in the water. Ben Carpenter for governor, says Tawny. I wouldn't say no to that. That'd be one way to make the difference. Yeah. Mr. and Mrs. Alaska, with the implementation of the 1413 BSA increase in defined benefits, your PFD has not survived this election. Yeah. No, it's, that's where it's going. All right. Check the funds on outside attorneys and lawsuits. Susan, all I had to do was check the funds on all the spending on the different ballot measures and stuff, and I could see exactly what's going on. Do you think that the perpetrator should lose their right to own a gun for such shootings? I definitely think we should entertain that idea. I mean, something like that. If you're not using it, you're just being reckless and endangering people. Yeah, there's a possibility there to lose your right for the guns. I think that should definitely be on the table. Kyle? I mean, again, I'm an absolutist. I think if people have paid their debt to society and done certain things, I think they should have some of those rights restored. But if you used your gun in such a way, I would not take that off the table for sure. Someone in Fairbanks shot a few buildings with an air rifle or a BB gun. Yeah. Ooh, Project 2025 will outlaw pineapple on pizza? Then I'm definitely against it. I'm definitely against Project 2025. If it will outlaw pineapple on pizza, that's enough for me. I don't care what you say. You can't change my mind. If that's what it's going to do, I am totally against it because pineapple on pizza is delicious. All right.
Good morning, Dukes.
Hello, sir. How are you?
Doing well. How about you?
Do I just call you Story from now on? Is that what I do?
Sure.
Sure.
Mr. Story, Senior Story.
Just call you Story. Hey, Story, what's up? Hey, so I hear that Project 2025 says that they will outlaw pineapple on pizza. Are you for or against?
I'm gonna have to question my involvement with the Heritage Foundation going forward.
Yeah.
I love pineapple on pizza.
I know, really. That's what I'm saying. I'm totally against it at this point. If that's what's going on, I am totally against Project 2025. If that's the case, because pineapple on pizza is delicious.
The Maui Zowie.
Oh, man. Well, pineapple, Canadian bacon, mushroom, and then half jalapenos at the same time. So you can get the sweet and spicy, or you can just get the sweet with the mushroom and so good. So
See, this is you go too far.
Why?
Can you just rein it in? That's freakish what you just said.
Oh man,
It's not even
so delicious.
No,
so
wrong.
So delicious. You have no idea. I'm going to force a piece down your throat one day and you'll be like, wow, you were
Whoa,
right.
whoa,
You were
whoa.
right. You were right.
Whoa.
Whoa, whoa, whoa. So are you ready for your post-election analysis segment there, Chris?
Sure. Why not? Let's do it.
All right. Well, that's good. Let's do it. What's with this pinhead down there that shot up the place down there? I mean, I'm just agitated by that. I hope they find a guy. That's all I can say. Yeah. All right. Sorry. We're going to continue here. Chris Story, the man from Homer, the Michael Duke Show, common sense, liberty-based, free thinking radio. Like, share, subscribe, ring the bell, do all that stuff. Let's do this thing. Here we go.
Chris Story, the obnoxiously positive and sometimes hilarious man from Homer, joins us every week to talk about pottery, positivity, and how not to become a nihilist. We're looking at you, Eric. It's the Michael Dukes Show.
That's a blast from the past right there. How not to become a nihilist, Eric. Yeah, Eric is a former producer on the program. Let's continue. Chris Story is our guest. Normally comes in just to do some positivity and uplift and everything else, but every now and then we sneak him in for an extra segment, and we talk about some other things. We've talked about real estate, we've talked about ballot props, today we're going to talk about the election recap and Chris's feels on everything that happened, statewide, national, local, everything that's going on, and he's going to give us his recap on the election and where he stands right now. So, Chris Story, author, potter, realtor, radio host. What is your thoughts on the post-election analyses?
One of the tenets of my backyard millionaire creed is to honor your instincts, and I wrote that in essence in regards to investing, like trust your instincts, honor your instincts, because you're right more often than you probably give yourself credit for. And I think the same applies to politics, though. For many years, I've said I'd make an incredible president of the United States of America. I believe I'd be an incredible senator from the great state of Alaska. I really, really believe that, Michael, because I honor my instincts, and my instincts were borne out in this election. And I know that probably rubs you the wrong way, probably sounds arrogant, egotistical, but it's true. I'm not surprised by anything that we've seen in the election, with the exception of ballot measure 1 in Alaska. I knew it would win, didn't think it would win this bigly.
Right. This bigly. So you're the Kreskin of Alaska. Is that what you're saying? You held the envelope to your forehead and we're like, here it is. I can tell you what's going to happen.
I think it's interesting that we separate ourselves, and it sounds really egotistical to think, oh, you'd make a good president. Give me a break. You don't know anything about nothing, foreign policy or whatever. Here's the thing. Are you telling me that Nancy Pelosi, Chuck Schumer, Mitch McConnell, or Dan Sullivan has anything that you don't? I don't believe it. And I think that your instincts, I think America spoke quite loudly on Tuesday and prior, and this is the first time we've ever seen this much early voting on the conservative side, which was great. Apparently, I think that really influenced not just the outcome of the election, but when we knew the results. Hallelujah. Did you ever think you'd see another presidential election, you would know the results the night of? I didn't think we'd ever see that again in our lifetimes.
Well, and how many times has Alaska actually played into a presidential election in that way? I mean, it was those 3 electoral votes actually counted in pushing over the top in the end. That was while they were waiting for some of the battleground states to come through. That was pretty impressive.
I've been having several conversations lately, and I've been going out and trying not to poke people right in the eye, my leftist friends or my left-leaning friends, but to at least take their temperature and say, how you doing? Like, what do you think happened? And I'm amazed at the number of people that truly believe that this was stolen, in spite of there not being any evidence. And one friend pointed out to me yesterday, he's in Illinois, and he pointed out that he said, well, Chris, remember you said on your own show, you said that there was something had run afoul with the 2020 election, but you couldn't put your finger on it. I said, I couldn't put my finger on it. There was no quote unquote one smoking gun, but we had so many irregularities that any thinking person, apply a modicum of critical thinking, would point to that and go, yeah, that was fishy. Something was fishy there, with all of the different states doing last minute amendments to how they would count a ballot, or when they would count it, how many days after the election they would count it, and stopping the election results at midnight. Next thing you know, Trump is not ahead 200,000 votes anymore. He's behind 32,000, whatever. Just the weird anomalies. Whereas in this election, nationwide, I think that this was a repudiation of an open border, the repudiation of somebody who has been in cognitive decline since the day he was elected, and everybody covered it up and ignored it, and mass media, everything else, as much as it was Donald's the guy. But I do believe he is the guy, and I think he's not just the guy. He's surrounding himself with men and women of great character that really will put America first. So I think that's wonderful. Alaska choosing to reject ranked choice voting along with the other states where it was on the ballot proposition. I talked to Phil Eison yesterday, the guy who put it on the ballot, and he said he's confident, like way confident, that when the results are completely tallied, ranked choice will be a thing of the past here in Alaska. That's beautiful. Even you have to appreciate
Oh
that,
no,
Michael.
I mean, I was in favor. Well, of course, even me, I was in favor of repealing ranked choice voting.
It was just fun to say.
Well,
even Michael Dukes gets that.
Well, it was astonishing, and if you look at what ranked choice voting did across the country, I mean, even places like, blue Oregon, ultra blue Oregon, Colorado, they defeated it well over 55.
Mm-hmm.
One was 54, one was 58% defeated it. In Idaho, they defeated it 69%. In 8 of the 9 locations that it was on the ballot, in one way, shape, or form, it was soundly defeated. Only in Washington, D.C. did they enable it. But in every other state in the nation, including Alaska, they either defeated it or, I think, repealed it. And that is astonishing. That's a repudiation of something that those on the left have been pushing for such a long time.
And I think it took all the ballot measure 2 took, rightfully so and understandably so, took the oxygen out of the room, such that ballot prop 1 was a little ignored, and I think missold in that it was a minimum wage increase, et cetera. It, never mind the arguments about minimum wage, but inclusive in it were other things for small businesses that are essentially a tax on business, and it will ultimately result in fewer jobs, less opportunities, less entry level positions, and smaller scope of small business and private enterprise. So that's unfortunate. We'll see how it actually plays out, but that was, I think, as a direct result of there being so much attention on ballot measure 2, and just what were the numbers in the end? Was it something like 12 million to 100,000 spent on the yes on 2?
Yeah, I think it's going to be closer.
Money?
I think it's going to be closer to 14 million by the time it's all. I haven't seen the final report. It was up almost 12.7, I think. And that was with 30 days remaining. And I know that they poured even more money into it. So it's probably going to be closer to 14 million to the yes on 2's 160,000, I think, is what they had in total. So it's essentially 100 to 1, almost 100 to 1.
Yeah.
Divergence between those two. And yet it's going to pass. I think it's going to pass in the 50.5, 50.6% range, somewhere in there, which is just as close as it was when it was passed, which is ironic, I think.
And I think if you look at statewide, for the most part, and nationwide, it I think comes back full circle to my original point, which was honor your instincts. I think Americans followed their instincts against all of what they were being told by celebrities. And I think, meritocracy is going to be overcoming celebritocracy. We're no longer in the age of the Beyonce age is over. Her relevance is over. Oprah has basically showed her hands. And I think it's empty. It's like she doesn't have the influence she once had. I think that's an exciting piece of what the results show us as well, is that new media, in addition to people honoring their instincts, is something's not right. I may not agree with everything that Trump's ever tweeted or said or X'd or truthed, but man, I'm going a different direction, and I think that
Right.
was collective across the country.
Well, and I think it showed a lot of. I think the celebrity. I mean, some of these people. I can't remember. One of the MSNBC talking heads was talking about. I don't believe it. I mean, Queen Latifah came out and endorsed her. How could she lose? And I'm like, it just again. I think it shows that more and more people are realizing that celebrities are great at what they do: singing, acting, sports, whatever it is. But people are starting to care less and less about what they're passionate about or what maybe their political views are, because they're not affected. I mean, this was about the economy and immigration. Those are really the two biggest issues in all the exit polling. That was the two biggest issues. When they interviewed Black and Latino men who had voted for Trump instead of voting for Kamala, the number one issue was jobs and the economy. That's and economics, inflation. It was all wrapped up in that they felt like he listened to them more than she did, and that the Republicans are more responsive than the Democrats were, which is a good thing. The problem here is I think that the Democrats are not going to do an after action analysis. They're not going to do any post self analysis to see what could we have done differently. You're already seeing that it's the identity politics again. Oh, you must have voted against her because she was a woman, or because she was of color, or couldn't it just because I didn't like her policies? I mean, the limited number of policies she put out, could it just be that I voted against her because I didn't like her policies? Well, no, it's because she's a woman. Okay, well, you do you, boo. That's what it is.
Wouldn't it be boo? Wouldn't it be great if one of the unintended consequences of the results of this election was that racial, the ideology of race and race baiting became a thing of the past relative to elections? I think about like this, Michael, that politicians are salespeople. Bottom line, if you're a representative, you got to go sell yourself every 2 years. You sell your product. What are you selling? If you're a president, it's every 4 years, at least a couple times. And then you're post-president, you're Barack Hussein Obama. What are you selling? You're selling, this is a disadvantage where you can't do it on your own. You can't make it without me. But for me and my government intervention, you'd be lynched. They want to put you all back in chains. Remember that? Never will forget Vice President Biden saying that to a group of African Americans. Maybe it's time, with part of this reconciliation, maybe we'll be done with that sort of racial identity and the politics as usual, at least for the last, Obama forward.
Well, we can only hope. I mean, and again, on the national level, we usually have so little influence on things that are happening out there. We need to, we need to focus more at home. I think. I mean, it's bread and circuses almost. We get to elect, every 4 years, every 6 years, we get to have an election. But other than that, we have very little input on that. We should be focusing on the state. Final thoughts on what's happening in the state. I mean, I know that, the Peninsula lost Ben Carpenter, which I think is a definitely a tough loss. Sarah Vance, it looks like she's retained. So, I mean, but what is your thoughts on the state stuff here? We got about a minute and a half.
Yeah, I think it's the same thing. I think Mary Patola's reliance on her ethnicity didn't make the big difference. I think Nick Begich is going to overcome his family's legacy of, politics as usual in Alaska. And Mark Begich is now in the, back into his housing developments and so forth in Anchorage. I think Nick is going to take that family to a new direction. I think all of Alaska is going to be better off for having rejected ranked choice voting. We were bamboozled, and we now understand that when it comes to buying these kinds of products or ideas, we have to take a very close look at the motive behind who's selling them and the money for the promotion thereof. So I'm very optimistic, Michael. I woke up on Wednesday morning feeling literally on top of the world.
Okay, well, good. Well, I hope you continue to feel that way as we get into this session, because I'm looking at these majorities forming and what their priorities are, and the spend mentality of I mean, they basically outlined, here's what we want to do. We want to increase school spending. We want to go back to defined benefits. We want to, bolster and spend money to get Alaskan gas to market for us, even though it'll be 50% higher than what we could have imported it for. I mean, I hope that you stay on top of the world for the whole part of the session. We'll have to see what goes on through there, but hold the line. You're here to now, you're shifting hats. You're going to put on your positivity guru hat. What is your topic for the next segment?
It's funny. I literally just put on my On Top of the World hat. That's funny. Alibis and other lies.
Alibis and other lies. Okay. All right. We'll continue with this here in just a moment. Chris Story is our guest. We'll return in just a moment. The Michael Duke Show. Common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio.
If you missed the show, you can listen to it on your time with Dukes on Demand. Oh, and it's free. Like America used to be. Streaming live every weekday morning on Facebook Live and MichaelDukesShow.com.
Okay, Chris Story is our guest. Susan, I don't know what to tell you here. She says, this election revealed one thing, and so does your attitude. Men will not elect a woman president. I would elect a woman president if her ideology and her policies lined up with what I believed.
You know what I'd love to see is 2028 Tulsi Gabbard at the top of the ticket.
Oh man,
Vance as her vice president.
Oh, I would vote for Tulsi Gabbard today. Yeah, no, absolutely. So Susan, I don't know what to tell you. Sorry that you feel that way, but you're wrong. I mean,
Oh, easy.
I mean, I'm just sorry. I'm sorry. And to lump all men into this, men will not elect a woman president. I don't, let's see. I voted for Sarah Palin. I voted back in the day. I would have voted for Sarah Vance. I would have voted for a whole handful of people that have been in elected office. I don't know why are they projecting their hatred on me? Why would they be like?
I think it's interesting that Hillary Clinton had a real shot in 2008, and yet the Democratic Party rejected her in favor of Barack Obama. So I don't know. Was that simply a gender issue in the Democratic Party? Is it something they need to overcome?
Yeah, I don't know.
Because they actually didn't even put up Kamala on purpose. I mean, that was sort of an accident, and mishandling, and Pelosi was very upset about that ultimately because she said if Joe dropped out earlier, they could have found a better candidate. In other words, paraphrasing, but that's essentially what she said. Yeah. So I'm not sure that gender had anything to do with it, to be honest. I think the Amish collectively voted for Trump because of the regulations on their farms. Yeah. Not anything to do with gender.
Yeah. No, I find it, but it's interesting. This is the identity politics that many on the left are throwing, that if you didn't vote, it was because you're a racist or a misogynist or, some other ist, that it couldn't have possibly had anything to do with their policies or their agendas.
You could also say it had nothing to do with her ethnicity relative to being Indian. Vivek Ramaswamy, I think, is an incredible asset to this country, even though his parents immigrated from India just before he was born. I mean, it's like, I don't see that having any role here.
Would it surprise you to find out that I really don't care what color your skin is? I mean, that's just, to me, that is irrelevant. But I mean, again, or what you have in your pants. I mean, either one of those things, it really, to me, is irrelevant. Are you the best person for the job? Have you outlined the best policies for me? I mean, I voted for Chase Oliver as the Libertarian candidate. I guess that was the one shining spot of ranked choice voting, is that I could vote for the candidate that I really wanted before I finally ranked Donald Trump down at the end. But hey, I voted for the people that I thought would do the best, regardless of what they, what their skin color was, what their gender was. But you're never going to convince people who are convinced that you are absolutely a monster, because you're just not going to convince those people. For some reason, they bought into it, that's all there is to it. So it's and of course, there will be no self-introspection, as Brian says. There will be no self-analysis of why they were so soundly defeated, the Democrats, why they were so soundly defeated. It immediately goes to, again, the identity politics and everything else. It's somebody else's fault. It's not our fault because we didn't speak to the people in the way that they wanted to be spoken to, or what attracted or appealed to them. It must be the people's fault. That's the answer. and that's unfortunate. But all right. So, but we'll see. What's your
And
hope?
the Democrats keep beating Carrie Lake down. Like, Carrie Lake's a great woman from Arizona. I don't understand why they despise her. Is it because? I don't even play that game. Is it because she's a woman? No, I don't know. They don't like her ideas. They don't like her MAGA mentality, whatever. But I never even thought for a second it's because Gallego was a man and she was a woman. It's just no. I just don't see the world that way. So it's hard to comprehend that argument.
Well, it's hard to. That's the thing for a lot of us. That's why it's so shocking as an argumentative tool is when they immediately call you a bigot or misogynist or whatever. It's so shocking to many of us because we don't think that way, and so we're kind of rocked back on our heels when they slap you in the face with that. And to me, I just look at it and go, well, I don't know how you could be even more wrong than you are now because
But see, the left has come up with a counter to that even. Oh, it's your unconscious bias, Michael. You're just unconscious to it. If you take enough classes here and enough, attend enough of these meetings, then you'll understand how bigoted you actually are. You just didn't even know you were.
Okay. All right. Well, I guess I could see that. But I must be my problem is that I'm unconsciously biased. I'm biased towards people who have the same philosophies that I do or similar philosophies. That's what I'm biased to. I think it's what everybody's biased to. Again, I don't care what color you are. I just don't. To me, that's just such a non sequitur, non-starter. But I guess some people, that's their whole life is wrapped up around that. And there you go. That's what it's all about. Chris Story is ready to do it. The positivity is about to flow. Let that hatred go. Let the hatred go. And just get ready. Here we go. The Michael Duke Show. Common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio.
The Michael Duke Show. Not your daddy. Wait, sorry. Not your daddy? Ooh, not your daddy's talk radio. Whew. I was scared for a second. Thought we were going down. Here's Michael Dukes and the show.
Yep. Hey, it's me and Chris Story, the man from Homer. You can find him at ilovehomeralaska.com. He's an author. He's got books. He's got audio books and written books. He's got workbooks. He's got podcasts, positivity. He's got his own radio show. He's a realtor. He's a real estate investor guru. And he is the Tony Robbins of Alaska. That's what we like to call him here on the program. Although, well, I would say he's almost as good looking as Tony, but not quite. But we'll get through that. Chris Story joins us again for segment 2. Good morning, my friend. Thanks for coming back.
Good morning, Michael. It's a great day to talk about alibis and other lies that might be holding you back.
Okay. All right. I want to know all about my own alibis and lies that I tell myself. What give us the rundown here.
Well, when you think about confirmation bias, and we were just talking about other kinds of biases that we have or are told that we've got, or maybe are unconscious or what have you, I will admit one thing that might be unconscious for a lot of us is our own confirmation bias, that we go to the media, we go to the world, we go to look at the results that we see happening on the political landscape or the economic or whatever, our health, and we have this confirmation bias such that maybe we really don't admit the truth to ourselves because we don't even see it. We're looking for that which confirms what we already think or suspect, and sure enough, there's the proof. People are idiots. I told you people are misogynists. I told you that they won't let me get ahead in this world because A, B, C, whatever reason you want. And those are just alibis and other lies that are or maybe could be holding you back. And somebody might be listening and go, man, nothing's holding me back. I've got everything I want, everything I've ever aimed at, I've hit, I've acquired, I've accomplished, I've become. I'm thrilled. And that's great. We'd love to read your book. We'd love to take your course. That's awesome. If that's you, then you can disregard this. But if you're like most human beings, then you probably do wish or want something more. You have some aim that you're aiming towards, some goal you're aiming towards, something in life that you want to become or have or do and make a contribution or a difference or influence, in which case then it's time to analyze alibis you've believed or some idea that you've bought and you adopt it into your own life, even though it may not be true. And we need to test those in real time to ensure that the map of the world you're holding is actually going to take you to where you want to go. But alibis and lies hold you back.
I mean, I wouldn't disagree with that at all. A lot of people are like, "Oh, of course I couldn't do it because of X, Y, or Z. Of course I failed because of X." It's always it's something else, and it's something. It's a mindset. It's a shift that you have to do in your mind to say, in spite of X, Y, or Z, or that's not really a factor because I mean, I choose to not let it be a factor in my case. Hello.
Yes. You just disappeared on me, but I think you're
Sorry.
back, baby.
Sorry, that's it. No, I'm just saying. I mean, that's the thing. I either that or I can't let it be a factor, right? You got to work against it.
Yeah. Or work with it. In other words, one of the biggest alibis and lies that we tell ourselves is I don't have the time. And then you realize, wait a minute, every single person on earth wakes up every day with the same amount of time in their bank. Elon Musk has exactly the same number of hours in this day that you have. What does he do with those that are different than what you do? Henry Ford had the exact same number of hours in a day as anybody else. So that alibi or lie about I don't have the time is a comfortable place to reside when you're avoiding the work, or you're avoiding the discipline, or you're avoiding committing yourself to something. And so that's just one of the most obvious, is that I don't have the time. Another, and I'm no longer a vegan, but I thought one of the most interesting things when I was doing that 3-year experiment, one of the most interesting things that people would tell me is that, oh, I could never give up meat. I could never do it. It's like, well, no, if you say you can't, then you obviously can't. You won't ever do it. Now, I'm not here promoting the vegan lifestyle. That was like I said, it was an interesting health experiment, and it worked for what I wanted, but it also taught me something else, that not only do people make these kinds of alibis and excuses like, oh, I could never, about whatever it is that you're doing. And it's not so much a reflection of they want you to stop as much as it is you're making you uncomfortable. You're stretching, you're growing, you're doing something different. It's like the crab trying to pull the other crab back down into the pot. Like, hey, where are you going, pal? We're all in this together. And we can tend to believe those lies or alibis and pull each other, or allow ourselves to be pulled back down into captivity. But the thing that it really taught me was that I have a superpower. And that superpower is this obsessive compulsive disorder that if I aim at something in my life, I will not stop until I've achieved it. And you, instead of using this obsessive compulsive to like worry about something going on, I realized, wait a minute, I can aim it like a laser. It's something I want to do.
Right.
And when I do that, I accomplish it. And I'm nothing special at all. I've got a PhD, GED. I've got nothing on anybody other than, wait a minute, if I could harness this thing that could look like a disability and actually make it an ability and a superpower in my own life, then I can leverage my time. I can leverage my money. I can leverage my abilities to a greater extent than I thought possible previously.
Well, and I think I think you nailed it there with that phrase, because we hear it all the time. Oh, I could never fill in the blank. Oh, I could never
Mhm.
not eat meat. Oh, I could never work. I mean, Elon Musk, the guy, he's got a cot basically in the back of his office, right? I mean, the guy spends 18 hours a day working, 19 hours a day working every day. Oh, I could never. Well, I mean, if you want to accomplish what Musk is, that's a component of it. It's not everything, but his hard work is definitely a component of it. Oh, I could never, scrimp and save and live in a small house and live in a 1-bedroom house with my family of 3. And I could never do it. Well, if you wanted to get ahead in a certain way, or that was part of a larger plan, you certainly could. But oh, I could never I mean, those are like the death words, right? Those are that leads right in. If you find yourself saying that, you are trying to alibi yourself from succeeding.
Yeah, exactly. And you may even be at a level of success that people would be surprised to learn you want something different or more. And that's okay, because this is a very private conversation to have. It's an analysis that should be very private. You don't have to tell the world. You don't have to share with your neighbors or friends or family that, hey, I'm actually really want to do this thing, but here's what's holding me back. That might expedite the process if you were willing to admit it, especially to your spouse. But it's private. It's between you and your conscience. And you and I've talked about this before. It's between you and your 85 or 90-year-old self that is talking to your middle-aged or younger self saying, I think you could have done something. It's the ghosts of those alibis that are going to come back and haunt you later. So if you're hearing this, guess what? You still have time. There's something you're here to do. I love the expression that you were born on purpose and with a purpose. And I truly believe that every single one of us, like a fingerprint, has a unique purpose. And it doesn't have to be to catch a rocket coming back from space. It doesn't have to be grandiose or incredible to, you don't have to be known by millions of people. I think that the ubiquity of the internet has created this, like, well, if you're not famous, why not? Some people become famous eating a cheese stick at Chili's on TikTok. What are you talking about? How could you not be famous at this point? It doesn't matter if it's not something you want, but maybe you want to contribute. Maybe you want to just volunteer more of your time. Maybe you want to get onto a board of a nonprofit in your local community that's in trouble and needs help. It needs your wisdom. There's something you have yet to contribute. And alibis and lies could hold you back unless you're super honest and you do an inventory of your own alibis. And none of us are without guilt here. We all have some alibis or lies we believed about ourselves or told ourselves. And like Zig Ziglar used to say, if you talked to somebody else like you talk to yourself, they'd throw you out of their house. They'd throw you out of their office. They wouldn't tolerate you if you spoke to other people how you allow yourself to think in your own mind. And some of that stinking thinking he used to talk about is what we need to address.
No, I mean, the self-talk is huge. And I mean, I think we talked about this before there. I was having this conversation with my daughter. Self-talk is huge. We are our own worst enemies in many ways when we allow that kind of self-talk to do it. Oh, I could never. Well, why couldn't you? I mean, other people do. Why couldn't you? Well, it's my personality. It's my thing. Or I'm just not willing to get out of my comfort zone. I mean, that's really what this goes back to. The alibis create that comfort zone. The lies that we tell ourselves create that comfort zone where we just can't stretch. And stretching is how we grow, right? I mean, stretching is what you're either green, you're growing, or you're ripe and you're rotten. That was somebody's old phrase. I don't remember who it was, but that was, you're green and you're growing, or you're ripe and you're rotten. You've got to be stretching. You've got to be growing. I look at other people and say, how do I do what they're doing? Not, I could never do it. I'm like, how do I do that? And I think that's important. That's an important lesson that, I mean, quite honestly, I think this stuff should be taught in school to kids of, you get what you say. And your self-talk is the most important. We got all these kids full of anxiety these days. Well, we need to be talking about self-talk is what we need to be talking about, and corrupting and eliminating those alibis to our own failure.
Yeah, I'm sure it's a great thing you just said. I'm so proud that copies of my book, Backyard Millionaire, was just delivered to an entire classroom here in our area. A teacher reached out and asked to buy him 25 copies for her class. And I said, no, I won't sell you 25 copies, but I will gladly give you 25 copies. And if one student gets one good idea and changes their life, it will have been worth every penny that I just donate, because I don't care about it. I just want the ideas in the minds of people that can do something with it. I think that's fundamental and foundational. No more alibis or lies shall you accept, because you are exceptional and you're here to do something.
Chris Story, we're out of time. Thank you so much, my friend. You can find him at ilovehomeralaska.com. Hold the line for a second. We are out of time for tomorrow. I think we're going to have Ronald Bailey from Reason Magazine. All right, Mr. Story, one final bite at the apple. Any final thoughts before I let you go?
Is it a caramel apple or one of those that's covered in the red stuff? Because I never liked the red stuff.
I don't like the red. Who thought the red stuff was a good idea? Let's just put a sticky candy coating. I'd much rather have the caramel flavor with that apple. But it's dealer's choice. Your choice of types of apple. It could be a sour Granny Smith. I don't know. You tell me.
Thanks for having me on, Michael. It was fun talking about the election results. And I do hope that people that believe it was misogyny or racism or xenophobia or whatever, that they kind of will take a small step backward, really listen to both sides. I do admire one friend of mine who she's a dyed-in-the-wool Democrat. She's not a woke lefty, really. She's just a blue dog Democrat who has reached out and tried to actually listen. She's even created an email address like that she wants to listen, like what were Trump voters thinking. That I can get on board with all day long. This whole the pejorative of, oh, you're a racist because you didn't support my candidate or what have you. I hope we can do away with that. But maybe you could entertain people as a guest or call in one day to say, let's talk about it, because I think you can make such a big difference in the conversation as you've shown Alaska-wide, Michael. I think you make a big difference. And relative to the economy here in Alaska, I think Trump's tax policies staying in effect. I think his America First resource development is going to benefit Alaska. I think we're going to have some champagne problems in our future, and hopefully you'll be able to hold our local representatives' feet to the fire relative to the spending piece of that.
Well, I hope so. I mean, we're going to try. We're going to try our darndest one way or the other. All right, Chris. Well, thank you so much for coming on board. As always, it's good to talk with you, my friend. We'll talk to you again next week.
Okay, sounds good. Thanks, Michael.
All right, folks. We are out of time for today, and we are ready to tackle it again tomorrow. I don't know if Susan's still here, but you're welcome to come back tomorrow, Susan, and talk with us. I don't know what name I called her, but apparently I called her a name. You're a bigoted sicko. Apparently, that's my big thing. I don't know what I did, but there you go. It is. I guess that I don't know. I guess it's real. I guess this is how some people feel, which is unfortunate because I'd really like to have a conversation, and unfortunately, some people are just not about having a conversation. They've already decided what all the problems are, and apparently we are it. We apparently are the problems in that regard. All right, my friends. Well, we're out of time for today. We will see you tomorrow. Be kind. Love one another. Live well. The Michael Duke Show.
We've shed our terrestrial radio skin, and now we are slimy lizard internet people. It's the Michael Duke Show.